Dear Father in heaven, Lord, we come to you and ask you, Lord, to continue each and every day to help us to be walking in all your ways, that you would guide us, you would direct us, you would strengthen us, that you would pour your grace upon us, Father, giving us the power to resist every temptation and defiling thing. We pray, Lord, as we have learned so many things this past week, how much we need wisdom. So as we continue to read through the A.T. Jones document, Father, and looking at the issues in 1892, the Sunday law issues, Lord, that you would help us to understand and gain the understanding we need with the knowledge. We might grow in greater understanding of the Sunday law and our history. So we ask, Father, for the blessing of your Holy Spirit to be with us and guide us. And we thank you and we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
I was thinking, because we already, I think we haven't gotten to this part where it might have touched on it, but when you think about what they were doing here, they are discussing wanting to shut the fair, not open the fair, the exposition on Sunday, because they claim that's the Lord's Day. So I was just thinking, I was just thinking about how that's just closing a fair, and I thought, it's not like a Sunday law that says, and I'm not trying to say good, bad, right, or wrong. I'm just thinking that's not like a Sunday law that says you have to worship on Sunday. It's just a Sunday law that closes a fair. And I'm not discounting it. I'm just trying to take it into perspective of what we always had the idea of Sunday law is. We always had the idea that Sunday law is a Sunday law, meaning you have to go worship on Sunday and you can't worship on Sabbath, right?
Like what we saw with Esther.
Yeah.
Like it would cause death if you did the wrong thing.
Yeah. And so at least in this, when we look at this history, it was declaring this a Christian nation, and the Sunday law that's involved is a closing of a fair, or not opening of a fair on Sunday. So it was just something that came across my mind as we, with all our thoughts on our idea of what the Sunday law, we thought it would look like. So anyways, I decided to point that out.
And I know it's become more subtle, over time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like with, the titles with, we got In God We Trust in all the schools, that didn't happen nationally. It's happening one state at a time,
Yeah.
and under the radar.
Yeah, in each state, like I said, in California, we had that, I want to say his name was Eric, but Newdall, Gary Newdall, I can't remember his name, but we had him in California that was fighting, he was an atheist and fighting against all the having In God We Trust and such in the schools. And he was fighting because his daughter went to the Elk Grove schools and his wife was a Christian, and he didn't want his daughter exposed to infringing on her freedom to, not have religion pushed on her. And that case went all the way to Supreme Court. So state by state, like you say, but each state probably had their own individual parties fighting, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So
Yeah.
who wants to read first?
I can.
Okay.
So we're going to start back at this paragraph because it talks about what's going on here. So the Catholic Standards charged the Independent with slander in the publication of such a charge, but the Independent answered in a way that is there a summary? Do you guys want to summarize? I'm not very good at summarizing. But so anyway, okay, so but the Independent answered in a way that showed clearly that it was not publishing merely a flying rumor, but from actual knowledge. In its issue of September 15, the Independent made answer in this part thus: the still hunt. Our statement 2 weeks ago that there was a still hunt in progress among Catholics designed to prejudice the present administration with voters is denied with some warmth by the Catholic Standard, Archbishop Ryan's organ. It's called our statement a slander and says that the document to which we refer as being circulated secretly has never reached the office of the Catholic Standard. That may be, and yet it has reached this office, and that it is exactly what we said it was, and that it was designed to be circulated secretly, the document itself clearly shows. It is a pamphlet of 32 pages from the press of Gedney and Roberts Company, Washington. It is designed by J.A. Stephan, director, and is addressed to the R.T. Reverend M. Marty, president of the Board of Catholic Indian Missions.
You want to enlarge it, please?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm so sorry.
Okay,
sorry, sister. Okay. I always forgot. Okay, so how's that? Okay. Though made in the form of a report to the president of the Bureau, the document is a bitter arraignment of the administration of President Harrison, Secretary Noble, and Commissioner Morgan. It refers to the bigoted commissioner and to the not much less bigoted president. The commissioner is also charged with falsehood, and the old accusations, which were promptly met and refuted at the time, are repeated, and all is written for secret circulation. The effect of setting the two great national parties against each other as the respective champions of the two great reliance?
Maybe it's supposed to be religions.
Right? It does look like it should be religions instead of reliance of the country, which the independent suggested and feared was not realized in this campaign, doubtless by reason of the secrecy of this still hunt document, and also for the very good reason that the chief campaign managers of the two great parties, Harity for the Democratic Party and Carter for the Republican, were both Roman Catholics. But Mr. Cleveland was elected. He who was the candidate whom the Catholic Church favored and who established the system of things which caused that church to antagonize Harrison, he was elected and has already, since his election, banqueted in private with the Catholic archbishops of the United States, the cardinal, and the papal representative at the time of their late official assembly.
Let me trying to grasp. So Cleveland was not a Catholic, is that correct? Harity for the Democratic Party and Carter for the Republican Party.
We're both Catholics.
We're both Catholics, but Mr. Cleveland was elected. So Mr. Cleveland was not a Catholic, I'm assuming, right?
According to the rules, it's like a yet. He was the one who was elected.
Stated. It's what's not stated, unless it was stated previously and we don't remember it.
Yeah.
He who was the candidate whom the Catholic Church favored, who established the system of things which caused that church to antagonize Harrison, was elected. Okay, so Mr. Cleveland, Grover Cleveland, I'm assuming, right? He was the candidate who the Catholic Church favored, if I'm reading that correctly. He's the one that the Catholic Church favored and who established the system of things which caused that church to antagonize Harrison. He was elected. So Cleveland was elected over two that were, maybe he was Catholic too, I don't know, but those other two were Catholic. Let me see. Do you mind if we stay a minute here so we can understand what he's saying here? So the effect of setting the two great national parties, Democrat and National, against each other as the respective champions of the two great, and that must be religions of the country. It's got to be, which the independents suggested and feared was not realized in this campaign, doubtless by reason of the secrecy of this still hunt document, and also for the very good reason that the chief campaign managers, let's see here now, the two chief campaign managers of the two great parties. Okay, so these are the campaign managers for Harrity. I'm glad we stayed here for a second. The campaign managers, Harrity is the campaign manager for the Democrat Party, and Carter is the campaign manager for the Republican Party. So the campaign managers are both both Catholic. For the Democrat Party and the Republican Party, their campaign managers are Catholic, but Mr. Cleveland was elected. Okay, so maybe we do need to back up, or somebody quickly Google.
According to Wikipedia, Grover Cleveland was a Presbyterian.
Was he the Democrat or the Republican? Because if Larry was here, he'd know. He knows these presidents inside out.
It just shows religion branch, further branch, specific. Let's see.
He who was the candidate whom the Catholic Church favored, and who established a system of things which caused that church to antagonize Harrison, he was elected, and has already since his election banqueted in private, so definitely Catholic, with the Catholic archbishops of the United States, the cardinal and the papal representative at the time of their late official assembly.
You're saying that Cleveland's Catholic?
Yeah.
Because according to Wikipedia, he was Presbyterian.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm saying that the campaign managers were both Catholic.
Okay.
But the Catholic Church favored Cleveland, and he won.
Okay, so it says that Stephen Grover Cleveland was an American politician and lawyer who served as the 22nd and 24th president. So he skipped a space in between there. The only president in American history to serve two non-consecutive terms in the office from 1885 to 1889, and then from 1893 to 1897. He won the popular vote for 3 presidential elections in 1884, 88, and 92, and was one of 2 Democrats, followed by Woodrow Wilson in 1912, to be elected president during the era of Republican presidential domination dating from 1861 to 1933.
So he's Democrat.
Yes.
Okay. So he's a Democrat. And the campaign managers, that's what it's specifying, the campaign managers of the 2 great parties, which are the Republican and Democrat, their campaign managers on each side were Roman Catholics, but Cleveland was Presbyterian and favored by the Catholic Church and elected, from what we understand here. I just want to make sure that I'm following and know what we're reading.
Gotcha. And so was this back when the Democrats were really Republicans and the Republicans were really Democrats?
The Republicans were in the North still. As best I understand it, that transitioned in the...
not until the 1900s.
So those in the North. So he's Presbyterian. He's Presbyterian, and he's favored by the Catholic Church.
And he's a Democrat.
Okay.
Okay.
And he meets with them right away, with the Catholic Church.
Yeah. So let's see, where did I stop?
Right there now on this.
Right here.
Now on the, yeah.
Okay. Now on the other side, the Methodist in General Conference, May 1892, decided to accept no more public appropriations for their Indian schools. The Methodists were followed in this move by Episcopalians in their late General Assembly at Baltimore.
So we remember reading about the schools, the Indian schools, where they were getting money I think it was the getting money to pay the religious teachers. Is that correct?
Yeah, but using it inappropriately.
Right. So the Methodists decide to accept no more appropriations for their Indian schools. Okay.
And the Methodists were followed in this move by the Episcopalians in their late General Assembly at Baltimore. Such Baptists as had been receiving this money have done likewise, and leading ministers of the Presbyterian Church have been laboring hard to get that body also to follow the example of the Methodists and others, and if they have not taken official action to refuse the appropriations, they may be persuaded to do so at the next General Assembly. When these great Protestant bodies all thus repudiate the system, it is hard to be doubted that the, it is hardly to be doubted that the smaller will do the same thing, but will the Catholic Church repudiate it? Will she refuse to receive such appropriations? Never. Well, then.
So you got the Catholic Church that wants that money, and the other churches are stopping receiving it. It sounds like they're making a choice on their own to stop receiving it.
Yeah, so they're stopping to receive it on principle because it's wrong. What they're doing with the money is wrong. And then the Catholics just want the money. They're going to do it anyway.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, I don't remember it being they were using it wrong. Is that what we read last week that I'm missing that point?
I thought it was being used inappropriately. Maybe I misunderstood.
I'm gonna be reviewing this document. So again, anyway, so if you want to try to back up and we can.
Okay, so I'm just gonna mark
this here.
I'm gonna mark where we are.
Yeah.
And,
yeah, where they went through all that about who was getting how much money.
Okay, let's see. I don't remember where that was. So
here you go. Here you go, right here. This is a good part of it, anyways.
So, see right there, there's the perversion of public money to sectarian uses.
Yeah, because they're using it's tax money. Okay, let's see here. When the Protestant denominations found that the Catholic Church was getting increased encouragement when they could get no increase, okay, the Protestant denominations find out that the Catholic Church is getting more money when they couldn't get an increase in money. They raised a cry of raid upon the public treasury and perversion of public money to sectarian uses. Their cry of stop thief amounted to nothing. However, the Catholic Church proudly walked off with her $44,000 clear in additional encouragement. Through the whole of Harrison's administration, these Protestants have kept up the cry of stop thief. And with the administration against the whole of it, they were so successful as to reduce the appropriations to themselves by the amount of $48,000 in the 4 years, and to the Catholic Church by $31,000 in the same time. So that for the year 1892, the encouragement stands $156,000 to all the Protestant denominations and $369,000 to the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church is still getting considerably way more, and it's coming out of taxpayer dollars to pay the teachers. This is not all, however, and in the rest of the story lies the increased peril and the key of the situation as it exists at the close of 1892. The sequel so far is this. From the day that President Harrison announced the name of General Morgan as Commissioner of Indian Affairs, the Catholic Church has kept up a continual warfare upon Mr. Morgan. And as Mr. Morgan was still retained in his place, this warfare was thus indirectly against the administration. But as she could not accomplish her purposes against Harrison's administration, she, the Catholic Church. And as the presidential campaign came on with Mr. Cleveland, who had opened to her the public treasury. Okay, so I think I'm getting now.
But
Cleveland, they like Cleveland because he doesn't want to stop the Catholic Church from getting their money. So they favor Cleveland over Harrison. Go ahead, what were you gonna say?
Oh no, finish your thought, please.
They favor Cleveland, which is what we were reading. They favor Cleveland over Harrison because Harrison was wanting to put a stop to things, or Morgan, and who Harrison put in place. But Mr. Cleveland, let's see, and it was a presidential campaign, who had opened to her, the Catholic Church, the public treasury. So Mr. Cleveland opens up the treasury, public treasury, taxpayer money, to the Catholic Church as the opposing candidate through her influence in favor of Cleveland for president. Following editorial of the New Independent, September 1, 1892, states the facts as to this phase of the subject. Okay, so let's read this again.
But what were they doing with the money? Well, what was the?
I think the issue is that because like I said, I need to go back and review myself again as well, but they're not, because one of the steps that they take is to start using taxpayer dollars to fund the religious teachers. So
right.
the Indian school was the one they were talking about, and then they're talking about the other schools. And so the Catholic Church was getting all this money for taxpayer dollars to pay religious funding. Does that make sense? Whereas that should be separate. The taxpayer dollars should not be paying for religious teachers.
Agreed, right, yeah.
But definitely I want to reread this document, but let me go through this part again. So we're backed up a little bit. So a curious feature of the present campaign is the still hunt now in progress among the Catholics. Our readers know with what persistency the Bureau of Catholic Indian Missions at Washington has pursued General Morgan. And Morgan is the one that wants to stop it, and he's appointed by Harrison, Commissioner of Indian Affairs, ever since he entered upon his office. So we're in election time, and the Catholics favor Cleveland because Cleveland opens up the treasury for taxpayer dollars to fund their teachers, their religious teachers. They attempted to induce the president to withdraw his nomination and failed. They tried to defeat his confirmation and failed. They endeavored to frustrate his purposes by legislation and failed. They sought to induce the Secretary of the Interior to overrule him and failed. They appealed again to the president, but without success. They attempted to destroy General Morgan's reputation and influenced by newspaper attacks, which only reacted in his favor and served to create a strong public sentiment against both of them and their cause. It is seldom that non-Catholics of the country have been so united on any subject as on this. An effort was made in their behalf to defeat the renomination of the president at Minneapolis, which met with a most signal failure, and now a supreme effort is being made to defeat his reelection. So this is, Harrison is, they tried everything they could to stop Harrison from running again.
Oops, sorry.
And so now we're headed into the election, and they favor Cleveland. Okay, so a pamphlet signed by one of the officers of the Catholic Bureau, Father Stephan, and addressed to Bishop Marty. You're going to scroll it. To Bishop Marty, another officer of the Bureau, assailing President Harrison, Secretary Noble, and Commissioner Morgan for the Indian policy of the administration, has been printed. So this other pamphlet is printed and is being secretly circulated, we are informed, especially among the Catholic priests, with a view of defeating Harrison and electing Cleveland. So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, propaganda against Harrison is being spread throughout the Catholic Church in order to then gain support for Cleveland. We believe this to be a blunder. She's asking, what is the Indian policy? I mean, it's what they're talking about is the Indian mission schools getting taxpayer dollars. Again, like I said, I'm going to review this again tonight, the earlier portions of it, but it was taxpayer dollars that are being used to pay missioners, teachers, religious teachers in the religious schools. And the Protestants are united against it with Harrison, and the Catholic Church doesn't want to lose out on that money. So they're spreading propaganda among the priests in the Catholic Church, speaking against Harrison in order to try to help get support for Cleveland to be elected. We believe this to be a blunder on the part of our Catholic friends. It is an attempt to carry into politics a sectarian question, which does not belong there. There are great national issues of supreme importance to our public welfare, which alone should decide the result of the campaign, and the introduction of this outside issue is deplorable. It is an effort to consolidate the influence of the Catholic Church on behalf of the Democratic Party. So it's an effort to consolidate the influence of the Catholic Church in behalf of the Democratic Party. Insofar as it is successful in this, it will tend to unite the Protestants in the interest of the Republican Party, and thus to array these two great bodies of religionists against each other. So the whole thing is to get Catholicism over the Democrat Party, which is going to then cause the Protestants to be among the Republican Party, and thus to array these two great bodies of religionists, the Protestants and the Catholics, against each other. This is certainly not in the interest of either Protestantism or Catholicism, and most assuredly cannot result to the benefit of the latter. Okay. That was a little more helpful to me. I hope it was to others. So we at least kind of can follow along with what's happening here. So the Catholic Standard, that's their paper, charged the Independent with slander in the publication of such a charge, but the Independent answered. So the Independent must be the Protestant writing document. The Catholic Standard, you've got the writing on the side of the Democrats, and the Independent's going to be supporting Protestants and writing on the side of the Republicans. But the Independent answered in a way that showed clearly that it was not publishing merely a flying rumor. So they're going to prove it, but from actual knowledge. In its issue on September 15th, the Independent made answer in part thus. Okay, so one statement 2 weeks ago that there was still a hunt in progress among Catholics designed to prejudice the present administration, that's Harrison, with voters, is denied with some warmth by the Catholic Standard. Our statement 2 weeks ago that there was still a still hunt in progress among Catholics designed to prejudice the present administration with voters is denied with some warmth, because they're spreading the propaganda to all the priests and Catholics by the Catholic Standard, Archbishop Ryan's organ. It calls our statement a slander and says that the document to which we refer as being circulated secretly has never reached the office of the Catholic Standard. Okay, so I had to back up there because I did get that backwards. So the Independent, it calls our statement a slander. That's the Independent, that what they said was a slander when they're speaking out against them, and says that the document to which we refer as being circulated, that's the pamphlet that they were sending secretly out to the Catholic priests, has never reached the office of the Catholic Church. And that may be, and yet it has reached this office. So it got to the Independent, but they're denying that it ever reached the Catholic Standard office. So they were claiming they were unaware of it, I think is what they're saying here. That may be, and yet it has reached this office. And that is exactly what we said it was, in that it was designed to be circulated secretly. The document itself clearly shows it is a pamphlet of 32 pages from the press of Gedney and Roberts Company, Washington. It is signed by J.A. Steffen, director, and it is addressed to the retired Reverend M. Marty, president of the Board of Catholic Indian Missions. Though made in the form of a report to the president of the Bureau, the document is a bitter arraignment of the administration of President Harrison, Secretary Noble, and Commissioner Morgan. It refers to the bigoted commissioner and to the not much less bigoted president. So this is the one that they're secretly spreading around through the Catholic priest to pit people against the current administration and to push them in favor towards Cleveland, who supports the money that they're receiving. The commissioner is also charged with falsehood, and the old accusations, which were promptly met and refuted at the time, are repeated, and all is written for secret circulation. The effect of setting the two great national parties, Democrat and Republican, against each other as the respective champions of the two great religions of the country, that's got to be then Catholicism and Presbyterianism, or Protestantism, excuse me, which the independents suggested and feared was not realized in this campaign, doubtless by reason of the secrecy of this still hunt document, and also for the very good, you want to scroll it, for the very good reason that the chief campaign managers of the two great parties, this is Harity for the Democrats, so these are the campaign managers, and Carter for the Republicans, were both Roman Catholic. But Mr. Cleveland was elected, so all their attempts, everything else that they did previously failed. That secret pamphlet went around and gained support from the Catholics to be against Harrison and vote for Cleveland. So Cleveland is elected, who supports what they want in the appropriations still continuing to come to their Indian mission schools. He who was the candidate whom the Catholic Church favored and who established the system of things which caused that church to antagonize Harrison, he was elected and has already, since his election, banqueted in private with the Catholic archbishops of the United States, the cardinal and the papal representative, at the time of their late official assembly. So you said he was a Democrat and a Presbyterian, right? So he's a Protestant, not a Catholic, but he's in favor of the Catholic Church and these appropriations going to schools. Okay, so now on the other side, the Methodists in General Conference, May 1892, decided to accept no more public appropriations for their Indian schools. The Methodists were followed in this move by the Episcopalians in their late General Assembly at Baltimore. Such Baptists as had been receiving this money had done likewise, and leading ministers of the Presbyterian Church have been laboring hard to get that body also to follow the example of the Methodists and others. And if they have not taken official action to refuse the appropriations, they may be persuaded to do so at the next General Assembly. When these great Protestant bodies, the Baptists, Presbyterian, Episcopalians, Methodists, when these great Protestant bodies all thus repudiate the system of giving taxpayer money to the religious schools, it is hardly to be doubted that the smaller will do the same thing. But will the Catholic Church repudiate it? Will she refuse to receive such appropriations? Never, okay? Okay, I think we all got that now, right? Just to follow what's going on.
I think so.
You think so? You're okay?
I am. How about everybody else?
Good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm getting this, connecting the dots from last week.
I just have some questions because I missed last week. But
Yeah, go ahead.
is it I'm stuck on the native schools. Like, is it the Aboriginal communities that they're talking about where they're taking the children and putting them in Catholic schools?
I think that's something we need to dig into, maybe just so that we better understand the document.
Because you keep talking about native this and native that, or the schools. And for me at that time, they were, I don't know, no, wait, maybe not at that time. I don't know how far back Aboriginal schools for the Catholic and the government set up to steal the children away from their homes and westernize them and Christianize them and rob them of all of their heritage. I don't know if that's what you're talking about, or this document is talking about, or if it's something else entirely. Because that was a real racial battle against the Aboriginals.
Yeah, and I don't know how, I personally don't know how much that, I don't want to say it's unnecessary information, I don't know. But the main point is the issue over building to call this a Christian nation. That's where we're kind of headed. So keep it all in mind. And if anybody wants to look into and bring that, you know, do some Google searching or something while we're doing this and bring that to where we might be able to understand it.
Is there a year that this
1892.
Pardon me?
This is all during 1892. Well, I mean, it's probably been a few years, whatever's going on, because you're talking about through the presidency of Harrison and you're coming into an election, but it's in 1892, I think, when all this is here happening.
And Wikipedia says that the cultural assimilation of Native Americans was a series of efforts in the United States to assimilate the Native Americans into mainstream European American culture between the years of, get it, 1790 to 1920. So it is right in this time period.
Okay.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, because they're missing a lot of that information in this document. This is more political rather than, you know, the other issues of that story where it's that whole racism against
right. It is.
Okay.
But I think that I mean, there's a whole lot that's going on here. What it's getting to is the issue where the United States or the Supreme Court calls this nation a Christian nation. So it's a battle between the two great religions and a battle between the political parties, which is basically where we're no new thing under the sun.
But underneath it, if you can see, it's the religions trying to enforce their own ideology on a group of people that they shouldn't be allowed to be doing that. And that's what the Republican Party, you know, I'm generalizing, but that's what the evangelicals are trying to do today, is enforce their own thoughts, their own, what's the word that they're using?
Well, when they declared a Christian nation, that's what they want them to be. That's what their
own template.
Yeah. Template.
And so that's what's going on underneath.
So, well then, when the Protestant bodies all repudiate it and the Catholic Church stands alone in taking public money for church uses. So that was the issue, is taking public money for church uses. And that was one of the things you're not supposed to do. You don't take taxpayer money, public money, for the church. It's a violation of the separation of church and state. It is inevitable that the Protestant bodies will make a unanimous demand that public appropriations to the Catholic Church shall cease. Then the Catholic Church can reply to all this with the argument made ready for her in this decision to this effect. The Supreme Court of the United States has unanimously declared that this is a Christian nation. So to stop, Fergus, come here, Fergus, stop that. To get to the issue is how, if I'm following then correctly, how can we be giving the Catholic Church money when this is a Christian nation? So to this effect, the Supreme Court of the United States has unanimously declared that this is a Christian nation. As the starting point and leading proof of this, the court has cited the commission to Christopher Columbus prior to his sail westward from Ferdinand and Isabella by the grace of God, King and Queen of Castile, these are crazy arguments that they use, recites that it is hoped by God's assistance, some of the continents and islands in the ocean will be discovered. Now, the religion intended to be propagated by Ferdinand and Isabella was the Catholic religion, the religion which Columbus revered and which he hoped to be the instrument of spreading abroad was the Catholic religion, and that alone. Therefore, as this royal document is adduced as evidence that this is a religious people and a Christian nation, as the only religion contemplated or considered in connection with the document or its purposes was the Catholic religion, as all but Catholics are heretics and not Christians, it follows that the religion of this nation is the Catholic religion and that this is a Catholic Christian nation. It is therefore perfectly proper and right that the Catholic Church should be supported and the Catholic religion propagated under national authority and from the national funds. So if you remember that they were some of the other things that we had read in the other articles about what they thought of the Catholics, and the Catholics were enemies. We know from the group threat, the Catholics are enemies as well. So the Catholics are using in their argument that Christopher Columbus came over here at Isabel and Ferdinand's command, coming from God, and they were Catholic, so therefore this is a Catholic Christian nation. The Protestants are arguing, no, this is a Christian nation, not a Catholic nation. So this is the argument which the Catholic Church can use at such a time, and the Protestants cannot deny that it is strictly logical throughout. The only thing that they can do is to produce as an offset the argument that the Supreme Court in the same decision goes on to cite other historical documents which contemplate and even name the Protestant religion, and therefore it is the Protestant and not the Catholic religion that is the religion of the nation. Thus the question, what is the Christian religion, would be raised, the controversy would be opened, the contest would be begun. Now, we do not say that this is the way in which this course of things must end. We do not say that this is the way in which this great contest and controversy must be brought about, nor that this is the way in which it will be brought about. We only point to the situation as it exists today and say that clearly this is a way in which it can be brought about, that herein lies strong probability that this is the way in which it may be brought about, and that because of this, the situation demands careful consideration on the part of the people. But come about this controversy and this contest certainly will. And when they do, then with national prestige and political as well as ecclesiastical power and preferment, the prize is to be contended for. All the bitterness and intensity of the old controversies will be revived and manifested, and even these will be intensified. Commotion, strife, violence, persecution, and all evil accompaniments of an established religion will afflict and even ruin the nation, even as that former thing afflicted and finally ruined the Roman Empire. So if you remember right when we were reading back with the Edict of Milan and how the Catholics were, they started out saying that it was all Christians, very quickly changed it to Catholic Christians. And so those other Christians all had to lose their property to the Catholic Church. You remember that?
Yeah.
So that was leading up to the 1260. The issue was between Catholicism and Christianity. So now you're in the United States, Catholic Church had her day and it's Protestantism here, and you're seeing a battle between Catholicism and Protestantism, and the Supreme Court is saying that this is a Christian nation. And to define it even clearer, a Protestant Christian nation, leading to a fight. This is why Jefferson, Madison, and their wide awake associates in Virginia so strongly and persistently opposed the movement to establish the Christian religion in that state. This is why they pertinently and forcibly inquired, who does not see that the same authority which can establish Christianity in exclusion of all other religions may establish with the same ease any particular sect of Christians in exclusion of all other sects. This is why they denounced that bill as a signal of persecution. So they saw what this was leading to as differing from the Inquisition only in a degree. And as the first step, but who would be, in this case, who would be the prey and who would be the persecutor? This is why they denounced that bill as a signal of persecution. So who's going to be persecuting? It would be the Protestants persecuting the Catholics, right?
Right.
As differing from the Inquisition only in degree. And as the first step in the career of intolerance, in which the Inquisition is the last step. So they're seeing from cause to effect, they're seeing these steps that they're taking are leading to the last step, which is the Inquisition, which is persecution. This was all true, every word of it. But if this was true of only an attempt to establish the Christian religion, how much more is it true of this decision, which actually establishes the Christian religion as the national religion, and upon proofs and authorities presented positively, declares that this is a Christian nation? Those noble men then saw all the consequences in the principle, and they avoided the consequences by denying the principle. It is certainly true now, as it was then, that all the consequences are in the principle.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
When you're reading about the Inquisition, because is this Catholic Inquisition or Protestant?
They're comparing it. They're comparing what's happening here to what happened in the Inquisition.
Yeah.
And it was the principle of the thing, if I'm following it correctly, it's the principle that they use that leads to that last step of persecution. So while they established back in the history of when the Roman Catholic Church was rising up,
yeah,
in the Edict of Milan, they declared Catholicism the only religion and the only one that was allowed to have property, and I mean, property was specifically mentioned in that. And so they were taking away everything from the Christians, right?
Yeah.
And they eventually, when you develop that hatred between the two and you persecute and you eventually persecute, I might be saying it wrong, but it led that initial stating that we're Catholics and we're talking about Catholic Christians only, not Christians, led to persecution. So now here you are in the United States, and the United States is saying we're Christian, we're Protestant Christians, whereas they were saying they were Catholic Christians. And now the United States is saying we're Protestant Christians. So you can be Catholic Christian if you want, but this is a Protestant Christian nation, which is going to pit the two religions against one another.
Exactly. It's like a chiasm in a sense.
Yeah, and they're doing the same thing.
And we're seeing that the Catholic Church really is losing its power. It doesn't have any power in America at all. Not like it used to. I mean, it did with the Aboriginal schools. It got the government involved and it had some power, some gain there, and they made it political, as what we're reading here in this document. But really, that we know with the history of the Protestant church is it's really in America, it's the Protestant church, and that's it. Nobody else matters. The Jews, the Baptists, I think.
Well, the Jews matter now because that comes into play, but not at this time. That comes into play later in the 40s and 50s when the Jews are no longer the threat because they
right.
the Jews, and they call us a Judeo-Christian nation now. So the Jews, that's why a Sunday law can't really happen because they support the Jews and the Jews keep the Sabbath. Well, however they do it, but the Jews are Sabbath keepers, so they couldn't do a Sunday law against their favored Jews. So the Sunday law is not what we thought. So go ahead, sorry.
No, that's good. You're actually putting in a few more pieces that I didn't realize. I missed that part of whatever you were reading from, maybe in previous documents. I didn't know that. That's good.
It's in the one that she's talking about the group threat and how in the 1860s through into 1880s and such, then the threat was the Jews, the Catholics, the Seventh-day Adventists, the free thinkers, and she lists the Mormons on one study, but then she doesn't list them on another study, but the Mormons were listed in some of the studies that she did. So, but the threat, and that's what becomes important, is the threat, because the threat changes with each of these three histories. And when the threat changes, the response changes. And that's how we eventually come to where whereas in this history, they want to amend the Constitution, but in our history, they don't amend it. They just take and read literal to literal, and their wrong interpretation, and believe that the Constitution is a Christian, that this is a Christian nation. So the threat is different, and that's what I'm just kind of trying to understand. But I don't want to get sideways from this study on where I'm figuring out. But I still don't have it all figured out. But anyway, so what I do know is in the histories, the threat changes, because in the 40s and 50s, that's when we embrace the Jews and all about Israel being established, and the Protestants believe that Israel is going to be reestablished and all of that. So the Protestants today, this sect of Protestants, or a lot of Protestants today, believe that the Jews, this is Judeo-Christian nation. In other words, Jews and Christians alike. So with the threat being different, the Jews are no longer a threat. So the threat changes, and when the threat changes, the response has to change. So, but what you said, yeah, it kind of does look like a chiasm, because back in the history of the falling of pagan Rome and the rising of the Catholic Church, of the papacy, is that they initially said Christians, and then they specified only Catholic Christians. So the Christians were left out and persecuted, couldn't have property, and the Catholic Church took everything. So here in our history, what you're seeing is this argument between, and it's interesting to show that the Catholic Church is on the side of the Democrats, which, if I remember right, during the Civil War, the Catholic Church, I know I've heard others say this, and I've not read up on it enough myself, but the Catholic Church supported the South in the Civil War. And so you have the Protestants, or the Republicans in the North, and the Democrats in the South. And so here we are in 1892, you have the Democrats supported by the Catholic Church, and the Protestants, or the Republicans supported by the Protestants. And stating that, no, this is not just a Christian nation, because calling it a Christian nation, if you take it back to what they said during the Edict of Milan, that if you call it a Christian nation, that would embody all of them. But they specified soon after that it's a Catholic Christian, and everything belongs to them. So here you have the United States doing the very same thing back to the Catholic Church, saying, yes, we're a Christian nation, but we're a Protestant Christian nation. And that leads to the persecution. So there's the battle that's showing, you know, that the threat is Catholicism, but we know that the threat changes. But anyway, so this brings us to them calling this a Christian nation, a Protestant Christian nation. So I don't have all the answers, but I hope we're learning. Okay, so it is certainly true now, as it was then, that all the consequences are in the principle. So the consequences, that's what comes at the end, right, are in the principle. And as the principle stands established and justified by the supreme judicial authority in the government, who's the supreme judicial authority in the government? So in all that the consequences are established and justified. In short, as certainly as in the Edict of Milan, there was wrapped up, so he's comparing what we were just talking about. He's probably going to do a better job than I did. In short, as certainly as in the Edict of Milan, there was wrapped up the papacy, just so certainly in this Supreme Court decision, there is wrapped up the image of the papacy. So he just summarized that. Did you catch that?
Who, me?
All of us.
In the Supreme Court. It's wrapped up in the Supreme Court decision.
Right.
Of the papacy.
Right. So let's see. So just in that, all the consequences are what comes at the end of the consequences of, you know, for every action, there's a reaction. You have actions that are taken and they lead to consequences. So in all that, the consequences are established and justified. In short, as certainly as in the Edict of Milan, there was wrapped up the papacy. So the papacy was supreme and everything, the property and everything was theirs. And eventually it came to, because it said that the effect then was the Inquisition, this great persecution. So just so certainly in this Supreme Court decision that this is a Protestant Christian nation, there is wrapped up the image of the papacy. So he's establishing that that is the image of the papacy because an image is a copy and we are copying what the Catholic Church did. And as truly as the issuing of the Edict of Milan was in principle and in embryo, the making of the papacy. So he's stating that the Edict of Milan is the principle, and that was the making of the papacy, the beast. So truly this decision in principle and in embryo, this decision the Supreme Court make that this is a Protestant Christian nation, the making of the image of the papacy, the image of the beast. Both are described, go ahead.
In Revelation, it says that before, you know, the second coming could happen, that the image of the Antichrist has to be pointed out, you know, the image of the beast and stuff like that. And so back then they were pointing it out in this, what seems to us like an obscure document, but I'm just saying that it was pointed out back then. If God had been able to come back then, Jesus, for the second time, it was pointed out already.
There was an image of the papacy?
Yeah. And although, you know, now it's going to be a little bit different because it's going to be the Protestants, it's still going to be the image.
It is the image. They just didn't, it was a history of failure.
Right.
It was a history of failure.
Right. But what I'm saying is that, you know, because our histories have to have all the different points, and they did have that there. If everything had fallen into place, if it had been a history of success, that it was determined, he was pointed out.
Yeah, but they rejected A.T. Jones and.
Right, I understand that.
Yeah.
That's not my point, but.
Okay, sorry. I think I missed it. I'm sorry. Go ahead again.
It's okay. No, it's all right. Everything was set up. If the people had been ready, everything was in place.
The image of the beast was in place.
But the people were not ready.
Right. Right. And as truly as the issuing of the Edict of Milan was in principle and in embryo, the making of the papacy, the beast, so truly this decision is in principle and in embryo, the making of the image of the papacy. So he's talking about in principle and embryo, meaning it is the making of it, but it's the embryo of it. He's comparing the Edict of Milan as being the embryo, the beginning, but not the consequences. They come later. You know how they pointed out that the consequences came later. Drawing a blank on the word. We just read it like 3 times. The Inquisition. So the Inquisition. So it's the embryo of the of the image of the papacy, but the consequences come later. But when we read that about the Edict of Milan, when we read that, they went through the details of it and showed how quickly it happened. So in that and what you're saying, yeah, it could have happened. I think is what you're saying, is it could have happened, right?
If the people had been ready.
Right. So it is too late now to avoid the consequences, because everything's already in motion now. It's too late now to avoid the consequences by denying the principle, as the principle is already established. And all the consequences are in the principle. So in that principle, in the embryo, in the beginning, lies the consequences. Too late, unless the whole people should rise up as one man and with one voice reject and denounce this decision, as it deserves, in the words in which the United States Senator William Pitt Fessenden denounced the famous Dred Scott decisions as utterly at variance with all truth, utterly destitute of all legal logic, founded on error, and unsupported by anything. By anything resembling argument. Blaine's 20 Years of Congress, Volume 1, page 133. There is no hope of this, however, because the great mass of the people have been for years refusing and still refuse to believe that any mischief can ever come to this country from any such principles. So they don't see anything wrong with it. They don't think it's wrong, and they don't see that they're actually repeating the very history of the Catholic Church. While the Catholic Church set up as the beast, they're following the same actions in setting up the image of the beast, and they don't see it. And it's really interesting because when something moves as slowly as it does, until you pull out the telescope and look, you can't see it. And then you got to zoom in on the details. So it was all happening in real time, and people don't see things that just happen in real time.
Yeah, I have a thought on that too, because they were, and correct me if I'm wrong, they were accusing the Catholics of what they will eventually do.
Right. Right.
Which is the way it always goes. Even if it isn't a spiritual body of people are claiming to be spiritual.
Those who forget history.
You eventually will fulfill just what you accuse others of doing.
Yeah, and so those who refuse to or forget history,
yes,
are doomed to repeat it.
Exactly. Yep, that's the phrase.
Okay, so let's see. So there is no hope of this, however, because the great mass of the people have been for years refusing and still refuse to believe that any mischief can ever come to this country from any such principles from the beginning. What happened at the beginning? While the ecclesiastical combination, which for years has been working to secure the very thing which the decision has now given them, will but redouble their energies in the use of the ascendancy which they now hold by the fiat of the supreme judicial authority of the nation. That supreme judicial authority is the Supreme Court, the authority of the nation. For these reasons, we repeat, it is too late to avoid the consequences by denying the principle, for the principle stands already established, and all the consequences are in the principle. And the ecclesiastical organization, which has so long been anxious to assert the government as a kind of sovereignty for themselves, will not fail to draw or even force from the principle all the consequences that are in it. So now we have captivity of the Republic. And now it is doubly too late to avoid the consequences by denying the principle, because the principle is not only established, but the consequences have begun to appear. On page 46, we stated that the president of the American Sabbath Union, in behalf of the whole ecclesiastical combination, took this decision and went before congressional committees and recited its arguments, and upon these demanded the closing of the World's Fair by act of Congress, because this is a Christian nation. So because they'd already said that this is a Christian nation, therefore they go and want to close the World's Fair, go to Congress and have the World's Fair closed because it is a Christian nation. So that was their argument. So it's a Christian nation. It should be, Jesus is the king of this nation, and all have to be Christian. And the next thing, all the rest follows. Congress has enacted 2 distinct laws, both of which close the World's Fair on Sunday because it is a Christian Sabbath and because it was demanded with threats by the ecclesiastical combination before mentioned. In this act, Congress has not only legislated upon a religious subject, which they aren't to do, but has distinctly committed itself to the decision of a religious controversy and has placed the United States government in the hands of church power. This is proved by the clearest evidences, some of which we shall now give. In the discussion of the question in Congress, it was treated as a religious question and nothing else. And this too, because the churches demanded it. So entirely was this so that in a communication to the New York Independent of July 28, 1892, the chaplain of the United States Senate said of the discussion in the Senate these words. Chaplain, that's going to be clergy, right? Chaplain in the United States Senate said of the discussion, so they're in the Senate and it's a chaplain. During this debate, you might have imagined yourself in a general council or assembly or synod or conference, so pronounced was one senator after another. Senator Hawley said, everybody knows what the foundation is. It is founded in religious belief. And Senator Pfeffer said of it, today we are engaged in a theological discussion concerning the observance of the first day of the week. So these are senators standing in Congress saying what they're discussing. And were they ever supposed to be discussing theological discussions and saying that we're founded on religious belief? As Senator Colquitt is a national reformer, nothing else was to be expected of him. And he has fully sustained this character in his speech, about half of which was made up from extracts from a sermon by Father Hyacinthe, old Roman Catholic of France. The rest of his speech was national reform sentiment of his own manufacture. Altogether, it was of such a sort that he himself began to see how incongruous it was in that place and halted with these words. But I shall continue this no further, Mr. President. No farther, Mr. President, for it may to some sound like cant, like preaching, as though we were undertaking to clothe ourselves in over-righteous habiliments. What's that? Habiliments? And pretend to be better than other men. Is that a religious garment? Anybody know?
It says clothing.
Yeah, clothing. They're clothing themselves in over-righteous habiliments. I don't know if that's how you say that.
Habiliments.
Habiliments? Is anybody able to look it up?
Yeah, I looked it up. It says habiliment, and it's a noun. It's archaic, plural noun, habiliments, clothing.
Okay. So just describing their clothing as being over righteous and we're better than other men. Okay. So in the Senate, the two most influential advocates of the measure were Senators Hawley. I thought that was interesting that there's a Senator Hawley there.
Like Josh Hawley.
Yeah, thought it was interesting. Of Connecticut, and Hiscock of New York. And Senator Hiscock said flatly these words: "If I had charge of this amendment in the interest of the Columbian Exposition, I would write the provision for the closure in any form that the religious sentiment of the country demands, and not stand here hesitating or quibbling about it. Rather than let the public sentiment against the exposition being opened on Sunday be reinforced by the opposition in the other house against any legislation of this kind, in the interest of the exposition, I say to the junior senator from Illinois, Mr. Palmer, he had better yield to this sentiment and not let it go out to the country, that there is the slightest doubt that if this money shall be appropriated, the exposition will be closed. The exposition will be closed on Sunday. If I were interested in this measure, as I might be interested if it were located in my own state, I should make this closure provision satisfactory to those petitioners who have memorialized us against the desecration of the Lord's Day. I would not leave it uncertain whether the government might engage in business or not upon the Sabbath day." Senator Vest, though professedly speaking for an open fair, was constrained to say, "If I abhorred anything, it would be any public act of mine which would say to the honest religious people of the United States, I am prepared to flout your opinions, to entirely disregard them, and to stamp upon them my disapprobation by giving them a vote directly in conflict with what you have asked." So we see somebody is standing for the right thing there. Senator Hawley greatly regretted that he was not enough of an ecclesiastic to do justice to the subject and exclaimed, "I wish, Mr. President, that I were the most eloquent clergyman and most eloquent of those staunch old sturdy divines who have honored American citizenship as well as American Christianity, that I might give something more than this feeble expression of my belief in the serious importance of this vote." And because he could not have this wish to be, his wish to be, for this occasion, the most eloquent clergyman and the most eloquent of those staunch old sturdy divines, such as John Cotton and John Davenport and Cotton Mather, he did what evidently he counted the next best thing and presented the views of Archbishop Ireland, Archbishop Gross, and Archbishop Riordan of the Catholic Church, all the bishops of the Episcopalian Church, and most, if not all, the bishops of the Methodist Episcopal Church, both North and South. He said there are more than 13 million people recorded as members of the churches in the United States. He then added to these attendants, associates, and sympathizers who go to church or send their wives and children and subscribe for it and have profound respect for it, whether they believe in it or not. And thus he made up the number from 40 to 50 millions. So there were 13 that were in the church, but then he included all these other people, the attendants, the associates, sympathizers who go to church or send their wives and children. So he compiled them all together and said they're all religious. Let's see.
And yeah, then he added an extra 10 million.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up here in just a minute and stop, Sister Allie. Let's see. And from 40 or 50 million who have more or less the religious profession or sympathy in this country. And then upon all this argued thus. So we'll close it off after we read this. There is no use in endeavoring to escape responsibility. If the Senate today decides that it will not close that exposition on Sunday, the exposition will be opened on that day, and you will have offended more than 40 million people of the people, seriously and solemnly offended them. No wise statesman or monarch of modern times, no satrap of Rome, would have thought it wise to fly in the face of a profound conviction of the people he governed, no matter if he thought it a profound error. It is not wise statesmanship to do it. Now, if gentlemen repudiate this, if they desire to reject it, if they deny that this is in the true sense of the word, a religious nation, I should like to see the disclaimer put in black and white and proposed by the Congress of the United States. Write it. How would you write it? How would you deny that from the foundation of this country, through every fiber of their being, this people has been a religious people? Word it if you dare, advocate it if you dare. How many who voted for it would ever come back here again? And that was, and he says, none, I hope. Congressional record, July 12th, 1892. So we can close there. Any comments or questions to where we're at so far?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm kind of fading in and out because it is kind of tiring for me tonight right now because it's after 11, but were you reading anything? Because you're coming to the World Fair right now. Has anything in any of the documents come up about the Protestants and that they're supposed to be protesting Rome and their dogmas, but they're keeping Sunday because they're still kind of like the children of Babylon? Do they not realize that at this point?
Well, in protesting Rome, they're doing the same thing Rome did. And that's what this kind of leads to. And that's why the Catholic Church actually mocks the Protestants, mocks the United States for doing the very same thing that she did.
Yeah.
So their idea of protesting against the religious dogmas is to go, it's like a little child who trying to think of how to word this. A little child who gets picked on or punished or whatever, or gets bullied and decides, well, I'm just going to go turn around and do the same thing. And I always taught my kids not to do to people what they do to you. It makes you just as bad as them. Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be better. You know what I mean? But people like to go have their opportunity. What was done to me, well, it's fair for me to get to go do it to you then.
Yeah. What goes around comes around is the saying.
Yeah. And that's really so sad because here they are. Yeah, you're right. They're supposed to be protesting the religious dogmas of the Catholic Church. And they come here and enforce religious dogmas on people that not everybody here. And he goes on to say that in this document later, that not everybody here is Christian.
It almost seems like they've seen the history of the Catholic Church being bullies and getting away with it for so long with all those most horrible, heinous crimes that the Catholic Church got away with, like Rome, under Rome, or the papacy all those years. But here and now, they're seeing there's power in being a bully at a Christian nation and practically doing a genocide on the Aboriginal Native community in that time, and even up into 1972, I think was, you know, anyway. Not only that, but African Americans, the slavery, and still, like, there's such a divide in America still to this day. Like we always talk about it. They're bullies.
Yeah.
Wow.
So many things happening all at once.
Yeah.
This particular one is what leads up to them, the Supreme Court. And he goes on to say that later. I like the way he writes it because you can hear his sarcasm in it, if that's the way to say it. But because the Supreme Court says we're a Christian nation, there you have it. We're a Christian nation because they said it. The supreme law of the land said we're a Christian nation, therefore we're a Christian nation. And it just, and but he's showing where it leads by doing this, where it leads. and it's already, the image is already set up. And here, like we've been learning, the Seventh-day Adventist Church is waiting for a Sunday law that says that you can't worship on the Sabbath, and it has nothing to do with that. So, anyways, this is the history that we're told that that Elder Tess has been saying that we don't understand, and we need to understand the 1888 history and the arguments, and it closes off with the arguments by A.T. Jones, which I find too.
I might have asked this already. I'm going to ask again because my brain is shut off now at this hour. What document? Where do I find that? What page number would document the whole? Did you post it? I think you posted it on Sabbath, didn't you, on the Zoom?
Which document? This one?
Yeah.
I'll send you this document.
Could you just? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay, because it's good for you to read it beyond what we're reading here.
I want to start right from the beginning too, because I've missed a lot of Mondays with you guys.
Yeah, I think we did it last Wednesday, and then one other day.
Okay.
But yeah, it would be really good, because to me, reading it with everybody is helpful, but also reading it, and she just put it in the chat, I think. So if you want to pull it from the chat, you can.
Okay.
And if you need me to email it, I'll email it. But to me, it's helpful. I already read it once myself, then going through it with everybody, but I plan to go through it again to just and I plan to go back and read how this nation became Christian as well as the other one on nativism.
Yeah.
So it's just really coming to better understand these histories.
Okay, I've got it. It came up. Oh, I did get it from you guys before. It looks familiar.
Okay, good.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I'm glad you were able to stay. Would you like to close in prayer? Sister Jackie, do you have something?
Well, I was just going to make a comment to Sister Allie, because that is on the Pioneer Writings, on the the CD-ROM from the Pioneer Writings. You can read it on.
I know, but I don't know where to find it. There's just so much of 18.
Yeah, there definitely is. There's a lot of writings there by Jones. So anyway, good to hear your voice tonight.
Oh, you too. I love you guys so much. You have no idea.
We love you.
Love you too.
Do you feel up to praying, Sister Allie?
Yeah, sure. Let's pray. Thank you. Dear Father in heaven, thank you so much for a breath of life today with our friends and family here, where we can take the time, the little group, and read this valuable history that allows us to be more grounded, and seeing the history of Protestant America and dealing with the Catholic Church or the Catholic nation, as well as the minorities in the country at the time, the politics involved, the powers that stood out as a difference to the rest of the known world at that time in America, and the strength it gains by being this bully religious superpower, in a sense, if I may put it that way. How we reflect on how the Catholic Church, or under the Rome, the papacy, treated the minority differences and the kings and the political system in the old Europe time period. The chiasm, nothing new under the sun, Father. And we today see how the image of the beast is set up, and we know that there's no literal Sunday law. Maybe we shouldn't even be calling us a Sunday law now, but we do see the image of the beast being set up, and we do recognize the events in the near future. You're giving us that opportunity to be prepared, to be settled, to be grounded, and to be sealed in it. What a blessing, and it's a huge honor and a high calling for us, all of us right now, to be where we're at. And we thank you for that you didn't give up on us. Many of us have wanted to give up all along this journey, numerous times, but didn't know where to go, wouldn't know what to do if we left, too afraid, really, and for good reason. This is salvational for us. And we thank you that you're keeping us focused and holding on to these lines, this information, and being protected by you. So we thank you, because I mean, just in a few short months, all those Adventists that are in denial and have no idea that they're going to get a whole new message given to them. And we want to lift them up in prayer, that we know what we're talking about, that they will hear it with authority, heaven's authority, and accept that truth and be saved. So we thank you that that we have this material, the drive to get together in groups, to study together, and knowing this truth and be prepared to share it. Thank you so much, Heavenly Father, for your timeliness and goodness. In the name of Jesus, amen.
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 Thank you. And
Thank
just
you for that prayer.
A couple of closing thoughts or points as it's registering in my head a little bit more. So the Edict of Milan was came down to, there's more to it, but I remember distinctly about the property and the issue of how initially it was the Christians, and Catholics are calling themselves Christians, but then they later specified, soon after they specified, no, Catholic Christians only, not Christians, but Catholic Christians. So they made this distinction, and the Christians lost their property to the Catholics because they had no right to have anything. So you come to this issue over the missionary schools and the money going to the different, to go to pay for teaching at these religious schools. So you have the Protestants, what seemed to take a step that's the right thing, that seemed to take a step in the right direction, that not going to take public money for the religious schools. But what that actually led to is because the Catholic Church said, no, we still want the money. And that seems to be the thing that forced the issue to say, we're not just a Christian nation, we're a Protestant Christian nation. So by doing so, they're denying the Catholics this, by claiming it's a Christian nation and a Protestant Christian nation, that the Catholics cannot have money. So kind of the same thing, where it was property, but now it's money. Does that make sense? Wow, does it ever? That's powerful. I think that's what, I mean, I was just thinking it through as you were praying, and I think because it was property before, and it's but it was like, because I was confused as to why, well, it seems like a good thing that they all say we're going to stop taking public funds for the schools, but the Catholic Church didn't. Huh.
About the money.
Do you have to pay, I have another question. Do you guys have to pay taxes? Does your government give you a choice to support, I can't remember how it goes. I only experienced this once in my life when I used to live in Alberta. I used to live in Calgary years and years and years ago. And the government, because I owned a house and I think I was paying a mortgage at the time, the government made me choose between which denominational school I was gonna pay into. Now, I didn't have a choice to say, no, I don't want to. I had no choice. It was either gonna be the public school system or the Catholic school system. And at that time I wasn't a Seventh-day Adventist, so I didn't know about the Adventist, or if I could be Jewish or Seventh-day Adventist or something other than Catholic or public or Protestant, right? So anyways, I chose Catholic because I was kind of still into conspiracy theories, and I didn't want to do public because I was Catholic before I came into the Adventist church. And so I had to pay a percentage every month. It had to do with either my mortgage or something, I can't remember. Do you guys have to do that as well, or is that not. So
not to religious, because that'd be the same thing, but I think maybe what you're referring to, and somebody else might have a better answer, but like property taxes that are paid through your mortgage, that because there are certain taxes that are in your property taxes, I believe that's where the money for public schools goes.
Okay. Yeah, that might make sense. And
that's correct. Our county property taxes go, a portion of it goes to the public schools.
Yeah.
And again, we have no choice either. It is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it isn't. There's no funding the religion. You know, choice between funding public schools or religious, because the money, the taxpayer dollars are not supposed to go to the religious schools.
Correct.
Oh, well, I remember getting a choice, and I just remember I'll pick Catholic then, because maybe that's the worser of the evils at the time. I don't know. Or the lesser of the evils, I meant. Okay, well, that's good.
We made a little bit of progress tonight.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Thank you for answering.
God bless everybody.